Welcome to the TRXL podcast. I'm Evan TRXL, and in this episode, I'm talking with Amy Bunszel. Amy is the Senior Vice President of AEC Design Solutions at Autodesk. Her unique path, starting as an electrical engineer in the semiconductor industry, founded a 3D wire harness design startup, and eventually leading teams responsible for products like AutoCAD and Forma, has given her a rare perspective on both the pace and the depth of change in the AEC tech landscape. While I was in Boston in June at the 2025 AIA Conference on Architecture, Amy and I had the opportunity to sit down and talk about how Autodesk is rethinking design workflows and interfaces from the ground up. We explore the evolution of tool usage and customer expectations, the power of product analytics for surfacing better ways to work, and how AI is becoming a design assistant rather than an opaque replacement for creativity. Amy shares insight into how Autodesk is creating tools for the early stages of design in the Forma platform, using context-aware data to help architects make smarter decisions sooner. We also discuss collaboration in the cloud, the future of AI assistants like the Autodesk Assistant, and why doing the dishes with AI is a better place to start than chasing hype-driven use cases. A key theme from this conversation that we're seeing a lot these days on the podcast is the move from a blank screen to a rich contextual starting point, one that reflects real project goals, real sites, and real outcomes. We dig into how that shift, powered by tools like Forma and intelligent data integration like the newly announced GIS integration, which comes through their partnership with Esri, stands to reduce upfront rework and change how projects begin. As usual, you can find links and other resources in the show notes, which are in your podcast app if you're a paid supporter of TRXL. And if you're a free member or casual listener, you can find them at the website, which is trxl.co. Sign up on the site while you're there so we can be in contact. And lastly, you can really help the podcast by sharing these episodes with your colleagues. So now without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Amy Bunszel.
Well, I would love to hear kind of your story because I don't think I've ever heard it. Like your, and as long as you want, but like, how have you kind of worked your way through the industry?
That's a great question. So, and I was expecting it because I know you always ask.
This is pretty much how I start. Yeah.
No, it's great. So I'm an electrical engineer by background, not the MEP electrical, but more of the machinery electrical. I worked in semiconductors for a few years. And then with some colleagues, we started a company doing three-dimensional wire harness design. Okay. So if you think about all the wires and cables that would go in an MRI machine, a piece of factory equipment or construction equipment, in 1996, this was a problem that was unsolved. And so we ran that company for about 8 or 9 years. And then in 2003, we sold the company to Autodesk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I moved from Boston to Portland, Oregon, and we started building parts of Inventor. And so we moved that functionality into Inventor. It's still shipping today.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited that, it endured for 20 plus years. And about 8 years into my time at Autodesk, the AutoCAD leadership position was open. Okay. And I thought, that would be interesting.
Speaking of things that are still going.
Yes, and a gift that keeps on giving, that's absolutely AutoCAD. Uh-huh. But, what a fascinating history, what an interesting time for AutoCAD as, BIM was coming into its own, 3D parametric mechanical modeling had been around for a long time. Like, what was the role of AutoCAD going to be for the future? So I uprooted my family and we moved to California, and that was really my first foray into AEC. Wow. And so it was great trying to figure out the future of AutoCAD in a world where, there was lots of other different kinds of things happening. And we really decided to go back to the roots of AutoCAD and focus on 2D drafting, documentation, drawings, all the things that people had really been able to get value from. And now over the years, we've got it running on desktop, web, mobile. It runs AI and all kinds of great things. So it's an extremely modern version of AutoCAD. Yeah. And then I ended up over time moving more into the AEC solutions. And so it's been a lot of fun.
Wow. And so you've seen a lot change.
I have.
Over that time.
Yes.
And being at a technology company, like trying to drive change, yes. Right? I'm just curious, like, what do you think, like, the big hits in your tenure have been? I mean, obviously BIM's a big one, but like as far as like things that have actually moved the needle for architects and engineers and contractors, what would you put at kind of your top of your list?
Wow. Well, I'll have to go start with the internet, really, and thinking about there was a joke, I guess, way back in the late 90s where, everything needed a .com and you couldn't raise money or do anything unless you created some sort of, internet-based application. But, in the end, that's really where we are today. So I think the adoption of the internet and then thinking about connectivity and sharing, it was a long, slow start until we got really to the cloud. Yeah. And then the cloud happened much faster. I think thanks to COVID, we had customers who were, over my dead body will we put any information in anybody's cloud, to, oh my gosh, it's COVID, we're going to implement cloud capabilities in the next week and a half, as opposed to having a 6 or 9 month change management program. So those two for me, but of course now it's happening even faster now with AI. Right? Every morning I wake up and there's some new development in AI.
I was at the keynote earlier, and there are many things that you just said that I want to tap into, but the keynote speaker showed the graph of adoption to 100 million users. And, it was the internet was 7 years and all of these things all the way down. And, ChatGPT, it was a very short period of time, right? It was 2 years, right? Or not, it wasn't 2 years. It was a matter of months basically from when they launched. And so, that speed of adoption, and I've seen other graphs like that in the past, like plain old telephone system, POTS, right? Mm-hmm. And then it was because not everybody had a telephone, and that was a very long time period, and everything keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And it's how much can we actually take, right? Real people have to, and yet because of all these other underlying technologies, the phones in your pocket, maybe the ear pods, there's so many things that are so interconnected that it does make it easier, and the interface matters so much more than it used to, right? And I think because it's interesting when you sell a bunch of products that probably have a 2 to 3 year learning curve, to really get into it, not just surface level stuff, in a world that is, like you say, you wake up every day and there's some new developments with AI, and being kind of bound at some level to those frameworks that you've developed over decades. How do you think about your customers and how you can move to react to their needs so that those adoption curves happen so much faster, because they are?
I think about it in two different ways. So I think about our installed base using those products where they've invested, a career worth of learning how to use them. And even then, maybe only tapping into 25 or 30% of what's possible.
Or maybe only needing 25% of what they offer. Yeah.
Or in some cases, there's 5 different ways to do something. What's the most optimal way for me? So one of the things I'm happy about is probably about 5 years ago, we started investing in understanding usage analytics, and then being able to tell our customers, oh, hey, there might be a better way to do this. Or we've sensed you're getting frustrated because you're sort of in a loop of doing some activity. And so using their data and their usage information to kind of feed back to them guidance, I think that's been really helpful. And we're seeing very good uptake on people exploring new capabilities or doing things differently and getting unstuck. So
how are they finding those things? Because a lot of times oh, I don't know what I don't know.
Yes.
And so are you putting stuff in front of them to prompt that?
We are doing a few things. Yeah. We started very gently with email. Now we put things in now we have more portals and other ways for people to get it.
So many ways.
And the best way is really to surface it in product, but to do it in a way that isn't distracting from their work, because you don't want to be clippy like back in the day where
it's so much. It comes up so much nowadays. It's oh, I just wish that this thing was watching me on some level, and other people are no, of course I don't want it. Watching me, but there are people who want it to be proactive in nature, and I think that's really interesting that we've come back to that, and I'm just hearing it a lot from people. It's oh, I wish I had a recommendation engine in the product, or I wish I had a thing that would say, there's a better way to do this.
We agree, and also it gives us ways to surface new features too, and to find those frustration points and then work on fixing them. So that's kind of how I think about the core portfolio that people have been using for a very long time. But with new things, we cannot create the burden of learning that we have with the current tools. So, and that again is about you being smarter, thinking differently about how we're building the interfaces, thinking differently about how people learn. I remember back in the day when we had manuals and we got rid of the manuals, like the decision process to decide not to print, an AutoCAD or a Revit
A dead
manual
document.
was a big deal. And now nobody wants to really learn that way, right? They want to learn in bite-sized pieces. They want to in the moment learning when they're actually trying to do the thing. So we need to use technology to make that all a lot easier for people to onboard to the software.
Let's take a quick break from the conversation to tell you about AVAIL. Is your team struggling to find the BIM assets they need? AVAIL's content management system simplifies access to all of your firm's content in one easy-to-use platform. No matter where your files live or what type of files they are, you can easily search and access them from AVAIL. Now, designers can consistently find and reuse all types of content. So what does that mean? Well, standards compliant models and drawings are easier to create. The documentation process is less chaotic. New hires are easier to onboard. Projects are delivered faster with fewer errors. You get the idea. Visit getavail.com to try AVAIL for free and request a free demo. That's getavail.com, GETAVAIL.com. My thanks to AVAIL for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now let's get back to the conversation.
Former educator too, and so spending a semester or a quarter teaching people how to use a product to some percentage, like you mentioned, 25%. Yeah, maybe, right? And going through the book through Paul Aubyn's tutorials, for example, right, like chapter by chapter. It's interesting to think about how learning has shifted, right? Like it's like even. I run up against a problem in a product and I'm going to go on Google and look like my wife, she's also does BIM and drafting and all these things. And she's just like, I can't find the answer, right? I just want to find the answer. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, search, dead end, search, dead end. And it's like, yeah, it kind of needs to be right there, right at the surface so that we don't have to go digging and ultimately find a dead end. And I think about the depth of the products and the breadth of them. You're serving a lot of industries. So does this mean like more specific products for specific things rather than products that do so many things, do you think? Or like when it comes to road mapping this stuff out, how do you think about that?
I think it's more different experiences based on the workflow the customer's trying to do. We've tried over the years to understand the different personas of our customers, but there's many.
Yeah.
So, but if we think about like, what are you trying to do? Like if you're trying to do, a carbon analysis, maybe you should just get a palette of tools that help you do that.
Yeah.
Or if we know you're doing, detailed design, you're going to get that palette of capability as opposed to if you're doing drafting or if you're doing different things. So for me, it's about not overloading the interfaces, but being flexible, but also being more intuitive about what the customer's trying to do, and then surface up the capabilities that are going to be needed for that that task.
Yeah, I think about like one of the vendors here, Parallax team, Aaron Mahler, been on the podcast before, and he makes templates for Revit, right? And they have everything in them. And his thinking, at least as far as I understand it, is, and he can correct us if we're wrong, but it's like start big and then throw away everything you don't need so that it's all encompassing, right? And I think of like modules inside of applications, like an animation package might have like a materials module and then an animation module and then a rendering module. And it's like, it just kind of filters out the tools that you don't maybe need, while obviously it's all one overall encompassing platform. There's so many ways to do it.
Right.
And you guys have so many tools in the portfolio. Is there any way to even bring consistency to, and not that it even needs to be, I mean, there's different minds and they think differently. There's so much to think about.
We use the word coherence more, because I think consistency for the sake of consistency brings you to a least common denominator kind of place. But software should feel like it was meant to be together if it's part of a family of capabilities. So I think, and don't be different for the sake of being different, right? If zooming should work in the same direction in all of the capabilities. So you have that muscle memory and you can focus on
intuitive,
the new things. Yeah. But for us, it's also like, to your point about the big everything universe. Well, maybe you can tell me, I'm working on, the multifamily residential project, and then magically, all those things we don't think you need go away. Obviously, you can go back and get them, but we can be smarter about how to start. And that's interesting to me about our new products, particularly with Forma, is we start with your location and the context and all the data you want to gather about the project, so you can start to make those good decisions, as opposed to the very intimidating kind of blank screen that we all used to start out with back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that the keynote speaker also mentioned. I hate starting with a blank screen. And I thought that was interesting and insightful, because like we as architects have always started with the blank screen or a blank sheet or whatever. And I know that this has kind of come up, especially in the last 5 years, let's say. It's like, why do we always start with, and just kind of challenging that base assumption that that's where design starts. I think that's super interesting, right? And so, and to your point with Forma, right, like starting with context, like every project has a place on the earth.
Yep.
And yet there's still so much design that happens like right here on this cloth, right? This tablecloth. I think that's super interesting and it's hard. It's how talk about maybe the mindset shift in the designer when you talk about something like that. Do people say like, well, that's not my process, or you see it as it's going to be your process? I'm just curious, because there's so many different approaches, as always.
I haven't heard anyone say that's not my process, even though I know it's not. There's certainly change management involved here. What I hear people get excited about is delivering better outcomes on the project and being able to have that information up front. So it's not like we're getting towards the end and we need to go double check that we hit, certain goals for the project. And then we have to go back and rework, or we have to go ask for more money, or we have to do value engineering or something. So I hear optimism that better information will provide them the ability to do even better work and to focus their efforts on the places where they can make a difference and to hit those, key project milestones. Yeah. The other thing I would love to see us in the future is if we could take the spec or the brief or whatever you start out with and start to kind of transform that into the context and into the objectives and the goals at the very beginning of the process, and then help track those throughout the entire process as things evolve.
Maybe like, what are you thinking in those regards? Like, because I haven't heard that before, but it totally makes sense, right? It's like infusing the different inputs into one location, kind of a thing.
Kind of, and thinking about, some of the outcomes are, very tangible and measurable. Some of them are a little less, but to the extent that you can let the software know where, who you're building for or what you're building. I went to the keynote yesterday in the TAP conference, and it was all about people, right? We're doing things for people. They have outcomes and impacts on the environment and everything else, but we really want to be thinking about the experience for the people. So the extent that we can learn from that, maybe compare it to prior projects that had similar goals and understand what was successful in those projects, all that stuff should be at our fingertips as we're starting new work.
Yeah. Well, maybe you mentioned Forma, and that's obviously a lot of energy is being put there. And I've had the opportunity to interview Carl on the podcast, and I love talking to Carl. So smart. He's so smart. And I love kind of his ability to, we've seen a lot of cool things happen, I think, with that product in particular, and kind of seeing the next gen of whatever you want to call this, a platform or whatever. But could you just kind of give a little bit of what's happened over the last couple of years since Forma kind of officially launched as Forma?
Yeah, so that was May of 23, I think. And I remember you talking to Carl. Carl, as a founder, was surprised that it was so hard to do some of these things, right? To bring the data together, to have that great experience in that early phase of conceptual design. So, we've been out in the market now for about 18 months or so, and we've continued to, add up. The great thing about a web product like that is you can update fairly frequently. Yeah. So still really focused on kind of site planning, but lots of additional information about context. The thing we announced this week was our Esri integration, which people are really, really happy about that, because they're using that data across their ecosystem anyway, and to bring all that information up front as they're making decisions about the project have been really critical. There's also our new much deeper integration with Construction Cloud and Autodesk Docs. So now when you create a project, you can create a project using the Forma data, using all the same permissions and controls that you're using across ACC. So we're really bringing design and make together in this common project ecosystem across the life cycle, which is great. So it's so much easier now for people to kind of get in there and start these projects. And then the third one is collaboration. Everybody in the industry is talking about collaboration in many different forms. And so we have the Forma board, which has been out for a few months now, and that allows you to have, many different ways of collecting all of the options and variants and things you've been working on a project in a way that you can collaborate with people who don't have to be experts in the tools.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company AVAIL, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation.
So boards is kind of like a Miro board, or it's a whiteboard. You can
It's
put
kind
images,
of an infinite
comments.
canvas, yeah. But you can also get in and like have people collaborating with their presence, right? Their little avatars or arrows or however.
From remote locations, all in the same file at the same time and contributing.
Yeah, I learned, I guess, during COVID, a lot of architects started using those products as ways to kind of share their designs. And so it's certainly caught on. And now if we can do it with a set of screenshots, right, this is live information that is current and up to date and you can easily add to.
Kind of viewports into models if you wanted. Yeah. Talk about that Esri integration, because I think a lot of architects don't think of GIS when it comes, like, in the power of what's in GIS. And so talk about why you decided to include that at this like early stages of design, right? Like, I guess that's what we're talking about with Forma and making better decisions earlier. And like, what is the secret or the magic sauce of GIS data so that architects can understand why they might be interested in it?
A lot of it is context, right? And thinking about, and with Esri context, it's deep, right? There's just tons and tons of data and information in there that help you with, if you're thinking about, zoning and all sorts of different types of data that can be overlaid in sort of a map environment. So it's pretty incredible in terms of all the site planning that you might do. And then when you layer on top of that BIM data, now you've got the full picture of kind of the horizontal and vertical situation that you're dealing with. And the cool thing about Esri also is, if we think about working with municipalities, right, Esri is really embedded into most state and local and federal government here in the United States. So there's really rich data sources that you can pull from there as well to leverage.
I remember talking to somebody and they were like, why don't we? And this was before, like, civil engineers had been using that kind of data for a long time, but it was like, why don't we have that? When I was running digital practice at our firm, it was like, we should be looking at GIS, because then we're talking about even like demographic information, right? Tying into census data that's part of that GIS. Yeah, I mean, I think, and like thinking about just additional context that is otherwise really difficult to locate on a map, right? I think getting back to that idea of a project is going to sit somewhere.
Yes.
And that somewhere has this bubble, right?
Yes.
And what's in that bubble? A lot more than we typically would apply that so early.
About crosswalks, bus stops, all
traffic,
data that would impact maybe how you situate something on a site, and give you better experience for the people you're building for.
And so some of the other layers are noise, right? And sun exposure, things like that. What else is on that list?
Yeah, so we do a lot of our analysis also is trying to leverage kind of the environment. And so everything from, we do noise, we'll do sight lines, we'll do, you can find heat islands, or, if you're building a campus, there's too much shade in some areas, not enough shade in another area. All those things you might not figure out until, way too late in a project to have an impact, and you can make those changes up front. And then collaborate with your stakeholders, whether it's the owner, or if it's the community, whoever needs to be involved in that collaboration.
So now, shifting gears a little bit with the docs integration with Forma, can you just talk about, like, obviously that matters, especially at an earlier state, and you talk about permissions and access and all of those kinds of things on a project. And this is a web-based tool, right? So people can play in the sandbox from anywhere. Can you talk about, like, why, maybe where you're going with that and why that's important now?
Well, Docs is our common data environment for all of our AEC products. So all of our solutions, whether they're desktop or cloud, are starting to integrate into Docs. And so that gives you that common data environment, so that you have a source of truth that you can understand, and it's easier to share the data across phases. One of the other great things about Docs is that we have a bridge capability where you can invite other people. So, you might be the architect, someone else might be doing the engineering.
So
you
outside of your organization.
Yes, you can bring them into the project. They bring the data, but they still own the data, and they can still control the data. So again, that's another type of collaboration, is how do we, instead of throwing things over the wall, how do we bring the data together and create these aggregated models that we can work together on?
And are you able to leverage that? Okay, so, like, thinking about AI and LLMs and like the way you can leverage those types of tools to, I'm curious, like, how are you thinking about all that? Because things are changing so quickly.
Yes.
What can
Well,
we do with
certainly having data in a common place is
Gives you
a
better-
critical way to
yeah.
start trying to figure this stuff out. And then it's about understanding what problem you're trying to solve, because you can have a lot of data, but you really have to understand, do you have the right data for the use case? So one of the things we did in Construction Cloud was an ask your specification capability using an LLM. And so this is great. So you've got a 1,000-page document. Instead of having a poor human being in a highlighter try to find things, you can query for, what are all the glazing requirements, or where are the concrete specifications, and we annotate it with where it came from, so you can go and check in the document and everything. And so that's really just the beginning of querying all of that data in an intelligent way. And then from there, we can start to think about insights. So what can we derive from that data, and then let you know. Risk is an area certainly in construction that everybody is interested in, whether it's cost risk, schedule risk,
Just interested.
risk.
Right.
I mean, you can blow a whole project with some of those things. So we already have some capability that will look at invoices and project data and look for patterns, and maybe say, oh, this, every time you use this vendor, you have this problem. And so helping the humans just have more information at their fingertips to make decisions.
So this is where this is what I do on this podcast. I bring it back and I think about Clippy. I think about Clippy's not the thing I always talk about, but it's like, in our story today, like this recommendation insight thing, whatever you want to call it, right? And like, your contracts in there, and your specs are in there, and obviously your models in there, and your analyses and all of these things. And like, as an architect, I just want, obviously there's like, we're limited by our experiences, we're limited by who's on our team potentially. And obviously that's where a lot of magic happens. But this, the thing that I think about with AI is like this other teammate who can keep all of that stuff in mind, like maybe not in mind, but like, I just think of like, you're one counselor office short. It's like this just thing that's running and checking to see if you're meeting the brief, if you're meeting the contract, if you're meeting the timeline, the schedule, all of those things, the meeting minutes, right? It's like,
you followed all the steps.
Because this is all part of the contract documents, right? Like, and not everybody, like you said, the poor human with the highlighter, right? Seriously.
Yes.
Like,
The well-educated poor human with the highlighter.
Yeah, it's
who probably doesn't want to be, who would like to do more creative things.
but it's like this system I would hope is kind of, feels like a teammate. Like,
yes.
Oh, thank God that was caught that, or recommended that. What a cool, and so like when it comes to like those kinds of potential things, what do you, are you excited about that? Like, is that, because that to me seems exciting as a possibility, right? For these things to be, again, clippy, like, hey, it looks like you're writing a letter. Would you like, right? I just feel like the potential's there now.
Or an additional collaborator in a way. Maybe the knowledge base of something that you can then query as part of a collaboration with other humans and with AI agents. And then for us, what's also exciting is it's not just about the insight, it's about, can you take the action? So in the beginning, I'm sure trust will need to be built up, right? But over time, if the AI is really good at telling you about the issue and then they can take action to resolve the issue, and you build up this paradigm of trust, or then your people are going to be a lot more productive and be able to focus on the fun things that they want to develop for people.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to tell you about something that I think is pretty great and you might be interested in it. And that is my exclusive newsletter available only to paid members of TRXL Plus that I call Leadership Edge. If you're looking to stay ahead of the curve in architecture and technology, Leadership Edge delivers insights that you won't find anywhere else. Why? Well, because they are my deep dives into the podcast conversations, just like the one that you're listening to in this episode, to give you an edge on the industry. Each edition of the newsletter provides key insights for forward-thinking leaders seeking innovation in AEC who are short on time, offering the context of each conversation without the need to listen to the full episode. I've actually designed them, though, to keep you updated, spark your interest, and encourage you to tune into the full episodes if those ideas resonate. And the best part is that they are packed with actionable takeaways to help you navigate the future of practice. By becoming a paid supporter, you get Leadership Edge delivered right to your inbox, and it's a direct way to support my podcast while getting exclusive, valuable content to sharpen your leadership mindset. You can join today at trxl.co and start receiving my Leadership Edge newsletters. Just click the subscribe button either in the upper right-hand corner or at the bottom of the page, or you can visit the link that I put in the show notes. Thanks. Now back to the conversation.
Oh, so you guys announced Autodesk Intelligence at the at AU, and AU, the message came, I think for architects, it was like, I was unclear still. What does that mean? And obviously, like, there was an emphasis on low-hanging fruit and value, right?
Yes.
And I, even more so all the time, like, obviously there's a lot of hype around AI and this amazing, big, cool, and it's like, literally, we just needed to do like the thing like we just talked about with the specs and linking what's there to what's in the 3D model and saying, is this the right thing? Is it the wrong thing? Like, those tiny things would be so valuable for architects. And so are you still really like beating the drum of like fundamental, valuable level?
We are. And we tend to call them productivity features. They're things that just automate a workflow, check for errors. Those kinds of things are where we're spending most of our time right now.
And how are customers responding to that? Because like I'll preface this by saying, like, a lot of people like the shiny object syndrome, but I think coming as a former digital practice leader, it's like people say AI and we're saying, we as in digital practice leaders, we're saying like, well, what do you mean? Like, what, like, because they don't even know what they're saying. And it's like, it sounds like you're saying data. It sounds like you're saying, but you're saying the word AI, right? And it's somehow magical, and it's not, right? It's like, we have to be really proactive about how and when we employ these tools to do these things, but they have, like, we really want them to do the stuff down here, like not doing the art, so that we can do the dishes, example, right? Like, we want to do the art and not the dishes. Yes. So I want the AI to do the dishes. Is that what we're talking about?
It is. And it varies though, because some of the newer tools, like the AI we have in Forma is we're training on surrogate models so we can do near real-time predictive analysis. And so that's a great use case.
For what kinds of things?
Noise, some of those things. So you can do a full-blown analysis, but we can also do it so like you can iterate really quickly, and then when you're ready, you can do the
more
bigger, more detailed one. Okay. So those kinds of things allow sort of the best of both worlds. Like, rapid iteration using a good enough answer that you're getting through the AI training, and then you can go and do the more detailed analysis. And so that's definitely a partner, like AI is a partner in your workflow. And then a lot of the other productivity things are just like routine, mundane tasks. We've delivered a few more of these on the manufacturing side to date. For example, we can automatically constrain drawings. So if we can look at something and tell this, most likely these are supposed to be perpendicular and this is supposed to be parallel, and we can start to put all the constraints on there. And so those kinds of things will start filtering their way into the AEC workflows. And I'd say most of our customers are very optimistic and willing to try things. Although we did see in our Design and Make report recently that I think they're getting a little, they're still about 68% of them are still very excited, but that's 11 points or so less than it was the last time we did it. So, but I think people are realizing this is a little bit complicated, and I have to be thoughtful about how I'm going to deploy these things across my whole enterprise. It's not just the Autodesk piece, it's the whole business that can benefit from.
Well, they're getting bombarded with.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, like when I asked the question about like, how are they responding like, Autodesk doesn't move fast enough? Or are they actually like really cheerleading for you to focus on the stuff that we were just talking about, which is like the mundane stuff, right? Because that to me is where you mentioned it earlier, right? Like we want to spend our time doing more valuable or better things, right? More exciting things. Yes. And so like in order to get there, I think we need to start here. That makes sense to me as a strategy, but are you still hearing like, how come you don't, like, where's the big flashy stuff, Autodesk? I'm just curious at what you're hearing.
I'm hearing more about we want more productivity features faster, because that's what they're experiencing with some of the other vendors, like with the Microsoft, where it kind of came in and was kind of pervasive, and now they're trying it all out. So they want to know, where's a co-pilot for every single one of the products that you have. And so we're being thoughtful. We're not just thinking about it from a Autodesk Assistant would be our equivalent of those types of workflows, but we're also thinking about features and capabilities that will be driven by the AI.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting future for sure. And I mean, is there anything else that you want to talk about with Forma that you're coming out with, or any other subject as far as AIA architects are concerned?
So what goes hand in hand with I think the collaboration conversation, the AI conversation, is data. And so we've been working for the last 2 years now on this AEC data model, which is this granular data model that is much more accessible. It's stored in Docs, our repository, and then you can use an API to get at that data, versus in the past where you had to fire up Revit, use the Revit API, and it was a much more challenging process. So I think that's going to help with collaboration. That's going to help people feed downstream processes, get more value out of all this data, derive other insights by matching that data up with their ERP information. So we're definitely seeing while people want automation in their design workflow, they also want that data to percolate throughout their ecosystem better and be able to use it for more insights in other ways.
How does that translate to medium and smaller firms, right? Who are like, what is that? I don't know what API means. I wouldn't know how to access granular data. How does that translate to them? Can it? I guess.
We're doing a few things to lower the barrier there. One is we've built a whole family of connectors. So like if you want to connect your data to Power BI or some of the dashboarding tools that come from Microsoft, we're making those sort of point-to-point integrations easy as well. So you don't have to be an expert for all of that.
I think one of the things that kind of blew me away today, and because I haven't done this myself, I haven't thought of a use case for myself, but in the keynote, she talked about, she went to Claude and she just was like, I'm going to be interviewing, and it's just a fictitious setup, right? But it's like, I'm going to be interviewing somebody for a position in 5 minutes, and I need a way to evaluate them. And it was like, build me a tool that will do it. And it like on the fly can actually just build a quick little app that then allows assign a rating. And it was like, here's the main questions that you should ask this candidate based on the role that they're. And I just thought like, it's actually really, really incredible to be able to just kind of prompt your way into making something useful very quickly. And I kind of, connecting the dots of connecting into granular data, it seems like there's a way potentially in the future where it's like, I need to change, all these doors from a this to a that. I need to change all the frames from a this to a that, through a very intuitive interface.
Yes.
And then just say like, okay, now how do I check this and make sure it actually happened, right? Giving kind of a checks and balances to the system. But it seems like you are kind of positioning your platform to be in a place where people could be able to do things like that with it.
Yes.
And that sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah, and we would put that under the Autodesk Assistant umbrella, thinking about creating plugins for all the products where you could ask Revit to change all these doors to this, and then you can ask it to report all of your door types. And so you can have, it happens in software development where the coding assistants are both writing the code and writing the tests to check the code.
Right.
So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. So
and not build a Dynamo script and then have to worry about how you wire it up and running that and sending it to a friend, or it's just like.
And we can connect the prompts to the Dynamo APIs, and a lot of these things will happen more naturally. Cool. And it's also an interesting way to learn because you can, I know on the coder side of things, like people are, learning on the fly with the AI as a partner, as opposed to, just giving it, we're not giving it all up to the AI. But that's where I think people who are curious and willing to try these things out are going to quickly help us expand the use cases. Because I feel like almost every day something else happens where I'm like, oh, well, now maybe we could do this, or maybe we can connect to that. And I don't know how far it's going to go, but it's going to change a lot of things.
It's going to change a lot. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this today.
My pleasure.
Pleasure to meet you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co. And I'll talk to you again next week.